Welcome to the Soul of Medicine.
Today, we have the distinct pleasure of welcoming a pharmacist who, through her career, has embodied the true essence of going beyond. Through her own healing journey, going beyond what conventional medicine had to offer, as well as her rise from healing challenges and even the direction of her profession, which is really intriguing. We'd like to welcome Dr. Izabella Wentz. She's a compassionate, innovative, solution-focused integrative pharmacist who is dedicated to finding the root causes of chronic health conditions. Her passion stems from her own diagnosis with Hashimoto's in 2009, following a decade of debilitating symptoms. As an accomplished author, Dr. Wentz has written several best-selling books, including the New York Times bestseller, Hashimoto's Thyroiditis, Lifestyle Interventions for Finding and Treating the Root Cause, the protocol-based #1 New York Times bestseller, Hashimoto's Protocol, a 90-day plan for reversing thyroid symptoms and getting your life back, and the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Hashimoto's Food Pharmacology, nutrition protocols for healing recipes to take charge of your own thyroid health, and her latest book, Adrenal Transformation Protocol, released in 2023. This book focuses on resetting the body's stress response through targeted safety signals. In a 4-week program, already helped over 3,500 individuals with a success rate of improvement of symptoms of over 80%. Now, what we just found out, we've got a new book coming the way, correct, on IBS?
It's going to be out in about 2 years, but I'm happy to share some tidbits from it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is exciting because it seems like we've hovered in the same circles for a long time. We never really spoke. I think we follow each other on Instagram and stuff like that. So it's really great to have you here. We want to welcome you.
Thank you so much for having me. I've taken your courses. I love the work that you're doing. I love that you're such an advocate for functional medicine and pharmacy. So truly an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And, Kay and I are the integrative, functional, lifestyle, and beyond. So I think this is going to be a really cool conversation that we can have. Your story is so compelling. I mean, when you look back, you kind of had the direction of being a pharmacist. Your mother was a physician, is that correct?
Yes. That's right.
Okay.
So we grew up in Poland, and I grew up there. And I remember actually going to the pharmacy with my mom, like as a 5 or 6 year old. And I was like, oh, this looks like a really great job. They may have given me candy, so perhaps they influenced me a little bit, but.
First one's free, right?
Yeah.
Very, very cool. So what I want to really touch upon here is how you went from, I want to be a pharmacist. Then I believe symptoms took hold even during your pharmacy training.
Yeah.
Then you kind of got this diagnosis. And now you're like, I'm going to share this with the world. So I think that's really cool. So how and when did your symptoms start? Like what happened at first?
I guess my symptoms probably started when I was in my undergrad. And I just started to I was this like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kid and was working lots of jobs and getting really great grades. And I started at the University of Illinois. And all of a sudden, a few months progress, and I'm having a hard time getting out of bed in the mornings, and I'm missing all of my classes. It got to the point where I had final exams during my second semester there of my freshman year. And I came back from class. I went to take a nap before studying around 3. And I woke up the next morning around 8 and my final had already started. And so I ran to the final in tears, and the professor was generous enough to let me actually take the final and not consider it a miss. But that just started happening in my freshman year of high school, where my parents, I came home for the summer and would go to bed around 8 or 9. And then my mom would come home from work around 3, and I would just be waking up. And so I had this weird fatigue that just seemed to start randomly. I also started having some weird neurological symptoms where I had a hard time with making decisions. And I just was very unmotivated, which was the opposite of who I was, right? And so my mom was just like, what is going on with you? Are you depressed? Did something happen? And so she took me to a psychologist, and that was her thought process is that maybe I was depressed. And, eventually I sort of developed some compensation strategies to be able to go to school and do all the things I needed to do. still dealing with that debilitating fatigue, but I would just kind of sleep the weekends and then just really make myself go to class. I ended up getting into pharmacy school, getting my grades were decent enough for that, thankfully, in my exam scores. And then during pharmacy school, I remember, you have like, I'm sure you guys remember, you have like 3 exams a week, and we were waking up at like 5 or 6 a.m. to go to the exams. And I just would have all these digestive symptoms. I would have like IBS all throughout pharmacy school, and especially if I didn't get enough sleep. So this kind of went on, and finally, I think when I was already a practicing pharmacist, I started losing my hair. And being a Leo, that's like when you lose your hair, that's it. Like, it's like, I could deal with everything else, but not my hair. And so I just really started to ask more questions. At that point, I wasn't a student anymore. I was a practicing healthcare professional. And I don't know if you guys went through this, but when you're a student, you're like, if somebody is a doctor or they're a pharmacist or they're a nurse, they just know everything, right? You kind of look at your elders as like having all the answers. But at that point, I had realized like not all doctors are created equally. And just because Dr. A said there's nothing wrong with me, maybe I could go to Dr. B and maybe Dr. B will actually give me answers. And so I started doing that. And I was eventually diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. My thyroid antibodies were like in the 2000 plus range. And at that point I was like, yay, I get to take thyroid medicine, right? But that didn't really help me as much as I had hoped. I still was having all these fatigue and hair loss and panic attacks, anxiety, carpal tunnel in both arms, IBS, all the things. And so I was like, what else can I do to get myself like feeling like a normal human again and maybe get myself into remission? And that's how I started my path to becoming the thyroid pharmacist, was really through my own healing journey and wanting to know if there was anything I could do to make myself feel better. And thankfully, I was able to get myself into remission and get rid of all of my symptoms. I spent a lot of time in PubMed, patient forums, went through conferences and lecture notes and put all of this sort of healing plan together for me, consulted with a whole bunch of practitioners. And I just really wanted to share this with the world because I was like, okay, people need to know that there are other things they can do in addition to taking thyroid meds that can sometimes be even more effective than thyroid meds, or might be a great complement, or, in some cases may prevent the need for having as many medications. And that's how I, just started writing, and I created this book called Hashimoto's the Root Cause: Lifestyle Interventions for Finding and Treating the Root Cause. The original title was actually even longer than that. So this is like the shortened title, but I really wanted to get all the keywords in there so people knew exactly, what they were looking for and could get the help that they needed. And that book ended up going viral, essentially. It sold a few 100,000 copies to this date, and people really started resonating with it and using some of the things from the book and started getting better, which was like such a huge gift for me. I think we all go into pharmacy to want to heal people, right? And I was like, okay, I wanted to invent a new drug. I didn't invent a new drug, but here are some things you can do to actually heal.
That's amazing. Well, you actually did more than that, than creating a new drug, right? Because so you win this process, you're told you have Hashimoto's, and you're given medicine. So my guess is it's like, okay, I've got that. Like they tagged it. They know what it is. Then it's like, well, did you experience like that didn't work, right? I'm still feeling this. So then what was in you that said, it's got to be something, and I'm going to keep researching? I mean, are you that internal researcher? Is that part of your quality? I want to know the answers. I'm not accepting this.
I don't know that I ever was before, but all of it just didn't make any sense to me, right? So it was like, why am I getting this in my 20s? Why is this happening? And what is the cause? And so at that point, I became that person where I was like, there's nobody really helping me. And this is actually what I have to do, is I have to advocate for myself. I think I really had an awakening in my job as a consulting pharmacist. I was working with people with developmental disabilities. And a lot of times these individuals were, for example, medicated when they were having aggressive behaviors. But when somebody actually took the time to figure out why they had aggressive behaviors, they would find that the person was in pain. And perhaps they needed some pain medications, right, to help them, or some physical therapy. And there was always sort of like this, different path. And depending on who you asked, you might get different answers. I was on a team with a physician, psychologist, a nurse, a behaviorist, and a case manager to talk about, one particular person. We'd spend a few hours talking about them and how to best provide the care that they needed and advocate for them. And so I had the privilege of reviewing, a few thousand charts of people and visiting them in their homes and just seeing how they were doing and making recommendations for how they could be better, and reviewing their entire medical records, being part of this team. And so I really felt like that helped me learn how to advocate for others, which then transferred to me advocating for myself, and just witnessing some of these amazing parents of the individuals who were just advocating for them, and seeing they were, some of them were using different modalities too than I got to learn about to help their children, when the standard of care wasn't really there for a person with, let's say, cerebral palsy or autism or Down syndrome. They had to go outside of the box for them and find other kind of healing modalities that might actually help them more so than, just give them Risperdal because they're feeling aggressive, right? Or they're acting aggressive, I should say.
I love how you said the different modalities, because I guess you might agree, but, we'll see in our clients and in the practice that you can have two patients with the same labs, but the modalities you go through, take a Hashimoto's patient. Not everyone is going to get the same treatment or protocol, correct?
Absolutely. It just depends on the person, depends on what their symptoms are, what their needs are, what their labs might be, what they're comfortable with. Some people might be, not willing to change their diet as much, when another person might be really wanting to do everything like the natural way.
So, Izabella, you mentioned the word, and I love what you said about your story there with your patient, and they were in pain. And so, I love that Rumi quote of pain is the portal in. And I've read in some of your articles and things about, maybe that emotional pain point also, right? So when you talk about the adrenals, and I have myself been in stage 3 HPA axis dysfunction, or adrenal fatigue, or exhaustion, or burnout, or whatever. But you mentioned something about, how we, particularly as women, override our boundaries, just sort of push up against what we're capable of and always on the go, which to me is what is actually the root cause of adrenal dysfunction, and then pushing into the thyroid and the gut, that whole triad, even including the gut in there as well. So I just, am curious, in your writings, in your research, and in your own self-healing, that piece of how much that emotional piece and stress did you find as, the true pain point? Because I don't know. I think the physicality is the caboose of all of this. And, when we start to dive deeper into, our traumas, for instance, or those kinds of things, I think that's the total missing piece in medicine that we don't talk about and touch, or we kind of skip around or do the physicality, so much of the physical stuff, and then get to that later on. So, our practice is called Soul of Medicine, and it is that intersection of that soul, spirit, emotional, biopsychosocial, spirit, that whole long word, and that horizontal of the physical. Could you speak to more of your experience with that, and what you have seen in your patients, and how that piece of the pie is important for you in healing, and how it was important in your own journey?
Yeah, it's such an important part of the healing journey. For some people, we know that ACEs, so adverse childhood events, and that childhood trauma is going to be a predictor of HPA axis dysfunction, having autoimmunity later on in life. For some people, it's not readily apparent. So they might be very much focused on the physical, and that's a great place to start for them. For some people, that trauma, that pain, they might be wearing their heart on their sleeve, and that's something that they may need to address first. And I do think a lot of people that I have seen do have some degree of that trauma, especially if they're not getting better with the physical things. So for some people, it might be like they're living in a moldy home. They had an amazing childhood. They have an amazing relationship, but there's like mold in their walls and it's like making them super sick. And that's like, that's another kind of trauma, right? There's so many different things that can cause inflammation in our bodies, right? They could be inflammatory foods, the diets that we're eating, the people that we're exposed to, the media that we're exposed to, the toxins that we're exposed to, the gut infections that we have, the infections, other types of infections. And they can also be inflammatory thoughts, right? And so they could be inflammatory patterns, or they could be things that happened that we don't even remember that just set off our HPA axis to be overreactive to stress, right? Or to be people pleasers, or to be people that are not really listening to our own hearts and our own needs and just doing everything for everybody else. So that for people can be a very relevant part of the healing journey. The adrenal transformation protocol, when I first started, I just really focused on the physical aspects of healing, but the adrenal transformation protocol, like it really focuses on all of that, right? And so we'll go from like having positive thought patterns and gratitude and affirmations, but I also have a little image in there. It's like, if you're trying to put a Band-Aid over your trauma by doing positive affirmations, then you're not really truly healing. And so I also talk about other types of trauma healing modalities. My personal favorite one is EMDR. There's so many out there, but that can be a really powerful way to reprocess traumas in a very short amount of time versus like sitting and talking for them for like hours on end about something that happened. EMDR is really great at helping your brain reprocess the things that happened to you as a child with a adult's lens, and really kind of rebalancing your brain, your neurology, and helping with healing and becoming a more empowered, resilient version of yourself. And sometimes that's the key part to healing and staying healthy. I love that you guys incorporate that into your practice, because I feel like it's so oftentimes overlooked. I mean, I get excited about like, ooh, labs, and, here's a germ, here's a bug we can treat, or here's a nutrient deficiency, but it's not something you can necessarily see on a lab, right? That's somebody's history of trauma.
And, it's really interesting because, Kay has been my door into that, right? Because I was like, trauma, there's nothing wrong with me. Now, that stuff as a kid doesn't matter. And, even through like the training of pharmacists through beyond the labs, it's like they come to it for the labs. But when you get into that stuff, even like a lot of pharmacists these days, they're really engaged into it, interested. I think deep down, we all know there's more, right? Or we hope there's more where there's expected. So it's really neat to see, I think, the practice, the industry as well being open to this. It's become much more, than it has just a few years ago.
I think one thing, from a personal standpoint, something that I'm working on is like that perfectionism, right? Because you pretty much have to be a perfectionist to be a pharmacist. If you give somebody the wrong drug, you can't make mistakes, because if you make a mistake, you can kill a patient, right? And so that's something that I've kind of grown up with, and I've been working through myself. We're always a work in progress, is being okay with making mistakes, because, as a pharmacist, that's a no-no, right?
That's an interesting thing to think about, and the adaptation that we've learned how to be hypervigilant and perfect as an adaptation from something else, right? And that really drives your adrenals like insane. And so the question that I've been toying with is, if I didn't have to doctor people and heal people, who would I be? And so if I wasn't always having to manage and micromanage somebody's pain points and all of that, which I do, that's my job. That's what people pay us for and come to us for, who would I really be? And that to me just opens up this whole new world. And it's very downregulating to the nervous system of like, maybe my job is to just hold space until, and teach people how to do it themselves, but getting into the nitty gritty of it isn't my jam. Any of our jams really, right? So I don't know, just this interesting questions there to dive into.
Speaking of that, I got a question. So you shared with us that you're Leo. If you sit with someone, do you bring any other esoteric practices into who you're speaking to or anything like that?
I really love looking at like the different personality types. So I think the one is called, is it Briggs-Myers? The Myers-Briggs. And then, whether somebody's an ENFP or an INFJ, that can really inform a person a lot about what brings them energy and what takes their energy. So this is something that I will have people go through as part of the adrenal transformation program, where I'll be like, let's figure this out, because so many of us are so disconnected from who we are and what makes us tick and what makes us thrive and what makes us exhausted, right? And so I go through that. For example, I know, just using my own personal self as an example, I'm an ENFP, and one of the things that's really challenging for me is mundane tasks. I'm more of like a visionary and just very much excited about new things. And my beautiful mom is like, a different personality type, and she's loves cleaning. And so she would like wake me up and the weekends, sorry, mom, every Sunday. And she would be like, it's time to clean the house. And I just found this like so draining. Then I was like an adult and I was like trying to clean my house all the time. And I just found that wasn't really a great use of my time. And a better use of my time was focusing on my work and the things that bring me a lot of energy and bring me a lot of pleasure. And then being able to pay somebody to help me out with like the cleaning and organizing has been a really big game changer. And my husband's very organized too. So I feel like I was able to win the husband lottery there, but it's just a really great to be able to figure out what gives you so much more energy and what makes you feel like you're thriving and the things that really drag you down. And so I love using assessments like that for people. And there's so many of them out there that I know different people will resonate with different ones, but just having that opportunity to discover yourself, I think, can be a big part of the healing journey.
That's great. I love that. So on social media, I love it because you do not just send out your highlight reel of life. I mean, you are very authentic in what's going on and with what you share. And I know, one, obviously it's going to be super relatable to your viewers, right? It's like, I got that. I mean, anything just a Hashimoto's, a symptom that they might be dealing with. But was that a natural approach to you? For you, just to get in and be like, I'm going to tell the world who Izabella is and what I'm going through and all that?
I'm from Poland. And so I will tell you that when I first came to the United States, it took me like 30 years, maybe 25 years to figure out that when people in the US ask you how you are, they don't actually want to know. They actually just want you to say, I'm okay. So that's a common greeting in the US. You say, how are you? And people just say, okay. And I was at my work and this older gentleman would come into my office to ask me questions about, his clients' medications. He'd be like, hey, Dr. Wentz, how are you? And I would be like, you know what? I didn't sleep very well last night. And my dog kind of, had an accident in the house. So I'm feeling a little bit, stressed. And he would just give me the weirdest looks. And I just feel like it's so important for us to actually talk about how we really feel. I'm all about like positive affirmations and gratitude and all of that. But like, if you're like suppressing these feelings of how you are actually truly feeling, you're not really serving yourself, right? And you're not serving the people around you, right? I think it's important for others to know that nobody is perfect, that we all have our challenges, and that's okay. And so I feel like it's very natural to me being from Poland, because we tell you exactly how we feel. And I think it's such a healthy trait.
It is. It's a Philly thing too.
Is it?
It's a Filipino thing too.
There we go.
Yeah. I know some people will say like, the certain cultures complain a lot. And I'm not about complaining, but I am about speaking my truth, right? Complaining doesn't really help, but speaking your truth and letting people know where you are. And, I just posted about some of the things that I'm working through right now. And I had so many of my community reach out with like helpful suggestions that I never thought about. So like, that's amazing. If you can share your truth, you can get a lot of help. And then I had so many people from my community say how seen they felt, and that they felt, they were grateful for me spreading awareness about some of the other things. So I feel like, not everybody's comfortable with that, and everybody needs to keep what, they're not comfortable with sharing, just keep that to yourself. But if there's something that you feel like you want to share and you think it'll help others, then please do. Even if it's not rainbows and butterflies, right?
Exactly. Well, and that just brings up, in my mind, like the male patient, right? So, oftentimes it is everything's fine. And, we know like functional medicine, lifestyle medicine has been wholly driven by the female, probably the 45 to 65-year-old female saying, this isn't right. I don't feel well. I need this fixed and I need someone to listen to me. And that started decades ago. We're starting to see men kind of wake up to that. But even to speak about the male patient, have you been experiencing or seeing, and you can speak to that point of view, like actually admitting that something's wrong, but also Hashimoto's in the male patient?
Yeah. Yeah. So majority of the people I work with are women. I do have some male patients as well, and I am married. So, and I have a lot of male friends and a brother and all of that. But generally speaking, for men with Hashimoto's, it's been very interesting to me. Like women will complain about fatigue and they'll complain about struggle with their weight and brain fog. And they kind of have their go-to symptoms that they really resonate with. A lot of times men will say that they have trouble growing a beard, that they have trouble putting on muscle, and then they have libido issues. And so we know that hypothyroidism can really impact testosterone, and sometimes just correcting the thyroid hormone deficiency can correct testosterone levels. Some people might need to do more than that, but that's kind of a key component that I feel like when the men reach out, it's usually those three things that are sort of the driving factor behind why they're reaching out to me.
Okay, interesting. Connective tissue issues, I've been seeing more on that, a variance of. I mean, some that I've been speaking with some of my pharmacists, they tend to have male patients with Hashimoto's, and a lot of it, they're in a physical profession. So now their physicality is what it starts to come up. Plantar fasciitis, carpal tunnel we spoke about, and that whole host of stuff.
Mm-hmm. It sort of kind of goes along with that whole muscle wasting, right? So you have more pain, you have that carpal tunnel, and you have these injuries that won't heal. Term I refer to it as like essentially muscle wasting, muscle atrophy is what they experience, and pain is oftentimes a part of that, and that carpal tunnel syndrome. A lot of times we focus on getting more protein absorption. So oftentimes it's like H. pylori, low stomach acid that we're looking at, getting some more amino acids on board, really shifting more into that anabolic state that can help with that pattern. But that's typically what and I see that in women as well, but primarily like in the gentlemen that I've worked with, that's one of their key things that they're working with.
Cool. Thank you.
What have you seen as the deeper issue, with the men? What is the emotional pain point, if you will, that you're seeing, either of you? So, or do you ask? I'm just curious.
I actually like how you said that, because if you remember, so Kay and I were on a call with one of our pharmacist students, right? And he was a male, and really the conversation went around him using his voice more and actually, being heard. And we kind of centered in on that. And that was quite impactful when he recognized, like, you know what, I haven't had my space. And as a male, we want to hold the space for others, right? And hopefully do that well. And we're all us men are trying to learn, we're not here to fix things and just to listen.
You're not? What?
It took me years to figure that one out. But there was just that thing. I think there's this, like when we saw in this individual, it's kind of like, I kind of want to be heard too, and just wonder if that's part of that element as well, in an energetic relationship that might be had there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from an energetic standpoint, the thyroid gland, it's kind of close to our voice box, right? And so not feeling heard is a part of that, or feeling like you never get to do what you want is another kind of thyroid pattern. I believe Louise Hay had talked about some of these patterns that people have, these beliefs or things that they find in their life. And those were two of the ones that were associated with thyroid issues. So in my adrenal transformation program, I actually have people, one of the things that they find the most healing and most enjoyable is I have them focus on doing things that they enjoy. So whether that's like browsing at an art shop or making cupcakes or, going on walks with their dogs or gardening or playing bridge, whatever it is, I just have them focus on that activity. One of the things I found is especially with fatigue patients, is that they're not necessarily doing too much, but they're not doing enough of the things that bring them, that energy and that spark. And that's been a huge transformation for a lot of my thyroid patients, just giving them permission to do the things that they enjoy. And, it's been really, really life-changing for them. I know a lot of the people that I work with tend to have a lot of responsibilities. So they are, moms, CEOs, they are really highly high performer individuals. And that often doesn't leave a lot of time for doing the things that they, just do for the pleasure of it. Like there's this like side hustle culture where it's like you can have your job and then you do your side hustle, but then, you add kids to that and a house and all these responsibilities and aging parents. And all of a sudden there's no time for you to the things that like you really enjoy doing, whether it's scrapbooking or, singing or whatever, people just need to find the time for that. And I think that can be incredibly transformational for people with dealing with thyroid symptoms and adrenal symptoms.
And women, and I hear this from Kay a lot. When you say you give them permission.
Prescription or permission, right? It's like your prescription to do the things you enjoy.
Yeah. But, they finally hear it's like, I can, right? So that's big.
Yeah. It's a huge transformation.
Yeah.
Isabella, what I love listening to you, because the way that I think of the thyroid too is the place between the heart and the head, and this place of modulation, and how I notice that you approach medicine and clinical medicine is really beautiful. There's some people who speak very esoterically and others that are very like straight up clinical, and just the way that you're able to modulate, not swing so much over here of like, oh, that's like fifth chakra. I was like waiting for you to say fifth chakra. And I was like, but that's such a turnoff for some people, or you could lose a lot of people that way. I'm not from experience because I'm learning from you, like these subtle dips into it, but still make it very relevant to them and your languaging. I feel that that's a beautiful gift that you have. It's really cool to watch that. I'm learning a lot here. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for saying that. I do try to bridge the gap between the conventional medicine and some of the more integrative medicine. And listen, if something sounds like woo-woo, there are some people that are just going to be automatically turned off by that, even though it might be a very valid modality. And I'm actually seeing that on the other side. Some people are just so resistant to medications where I'm like, hey, you know what? If you have like a parasitic infection, I don't care if you're on keto, paleo, autoimmune paleo diet, you're going to be inflamed. Like, let's get some meds on board and get rid of that bugger, right? So there's just so many beautiful healing modalities. And I think using them together produces the most incredible results, right?
I want to ask a question about your relationship with book writing. So there's been a quote that writing a book is like taking an ice axe to a frozen sea within.
Sounds about right. Yeah, it's a love-hate relationship.
What's the journey? Do you realize so much about yourself? Do you learn like so much more as you develop into it or step on that journey than you even thought you would expect?
Well, it's interesting because I'll have these ideas about things, but I won't have necessarily a lot of research to back them up. So when I have my articles on my website are very research-based and my books are very research-based, but like some of the clinical work or my programs are more experience-based. So this is the pattern that I see. And I found this thing helps this thing. And that's kind of how I typically approach things, is from pattern recognition. But then when I write books, I go into a deep dive of trying to find all the research. And then it's like, holy cow, there's these like patterns that are present in the thing, or there's research behind the patterns that I'm finding, but somehow this is not mainstream front page news. For example, when I was working with Hashimoto's clients, I found about like a third of them had this protozoa called Blastocystis hominis, and treating it can get the person into remission or feeling a lot better. And I was like, I wonder if this is some kind of a pattern. So then I just started incorporating that with my clients, where I'm like, you know what? I've gotten like 100 tests or so with this rate. So I'm just going to assume that 1 in 3 people are going to have it. And then a few years down the road, there was a few articles published on PubMed talking about the connection between blasto and the interleukins that it creates in the body and how that could impact thyroid function, and few cases of remission from treating that protozoa. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been seeing these patterns. So it's been really cool when I can find some of this research to back up some of the things that I've been seeing just clinically or in my own observations. So that's always a really fun part. And I could probably spend, all of my days on that. And I do spend a lot of time in research mode and fact finding mode. I have a research assistant and I have a writer that I work with. And so we have like this really great collaboration where I'll have them go down the rabbit holes with me. And then we'll try to find this information. So I really, really love that part. What I don't love is trying to get things into word count. So a lot of times I have a lot to say, but to try to get it in a book that's digestible, that takes a lot of time, of my time. So, and the other part is, the process that I have is trying to make the book really digestible so that the person isn't overwhelmed and that the person finds the information useful and relevant and actionable. And then another part of it is, oftentimes I'll try things. When I'll be like, oh my gosh, I discovered this really cool new supplement or healing modality, then I'll try it on myself or my family. So that's always really fun to be a bit of a guinea pig if I hadn't known about something before. The thing I don't love about it is it has to be such intensely focused work for so long, because you kind of get into this zone where if you were to like work on it for 4 hours a week and then picking up the next week, you lose a lot of that traction and a lot of that momentum. So you have this focused time period where you're just pretty much eating, breathing the manuscript. And that can be really tough for me as like a mom or a human. And, my house starts looking like, there was a tornado that came through it, and a lot of my other, I guess, responsibilities and things kind of pile up. So that can be kind of a tough process. And then usually I'm not showering. I'm not doing my hair. I'm just wearing like sweatpants, not working out. And, it'll be like I'm writing about healing the adrenals, and I'm talking about spending time in nature, getting lots of sleep, eating really good food. And I'm like up all hours of the night. I'm in front of my computer like this, and I'm like eating takeout, right? So there's a bit of, I guess that feels a bit, a bit of a disconnect from that, right?
Sure. It's kind of like that quintessential writer archetype. You're sitting there with a bottle of whiskey at nighttime, cigarette in hand, and, the rest of the world.
Oh yeah. And then the people that are reading my stuff are like so healthy, and I'm just like, I haven't brushed my hair in a week. And so sometimes that's part of the process. And then there's the part of the process, which is marketing the book, which is basically for a few months straight. It's just like hair and makeup every day. And I'm like, ooh, this is fun. But then you also can't do anything else beyond, I really actually do enjoy that. I get to do lots of interviews and fun things. But then the other responsibilities also kind of fall off. So then it's like, oh, what about my other obligations? So it can be quite an intense process, which it is what it is. But it's the amazing and the best part is when people get to read the book and then they write messages to me, or they write a review and they're like, oh my gosh, I tried this and I'm feeling so much better. And that just brings me to tears. I'm sorry, you guys. That just brings me to tears every time. I've been doing this for over 10 years. But every time I get a message or a review or a comment, or I meet a lot of people at Target when I'm running errands and I'm like looking like a mess. They're like, oh my gosh, you're Izabella Wentz. So your book changed my life. And I'm like, yay. And there's my kid like throwing, a tantrum, like, so,
and I'm real.
And yeah. And that's just amazing to me, is like people from all over the world whose lives have been changed and impacted for the better. And that makes it all worth it. Even like the not showering for weeks and the knots in my hair, right?
Once again, you're real. That's awesome. I love it. No, this is fascinating. This is fabulous.
I think it's great. I think it's inspiring. Thank you so much for your honesty and using your voice as a gift. It's really beautiful. Appreciate that.
Thank you. You're so kind.
I was going to ask if you have any, we're starting to see more pharmacists wanted to, fall into this role, this more clinician, this coach thing, the functional, the lifestyle, any words of wisdom. And I mean, this can even go to the physicians and everyone else, because it's, we're kind of all in the same umbrella, right? We're clinicians, we're coaches, we're bringing this all together, and we're looking at all possible things of medicine. So I don't know, any message to them as they're just embarking on their journey?
I mean, I think it's amazing. It's so fulfilling to be able to spend time with people and then give them some tools and resources. It's quite a journey for yourself, I think, as you undergo functional medicine. And it is a bit of an unlearning process. I think I'm still going through that, with some things with my own son. It's like, I'll be like, oh, eczema. Yes, we do Vanicream for that, right? And then it's like, no, actually, there's a root cause of that, right? There are things we can do to make that better and make that go into remission completely. And so I think it's a journey. I think it's totally worth it. You're going to end up healthier through the process. Your family's going to end up healthier, and you'll be able to impact, I feel like, people on a deeper level too.
I love that. So it's a professional, but it's also a personal journey. So
I absolutely believe that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we're going to have everything in the show notes, but how can people reach out, contact you, find you? What's the best way right now?
My website is Thyroid Pharmacist. So I post helpful research every week and deep dive articles on how to solve various things. I don't do any kind of gatekeeping. I just try to put everything that I know out into the world. So you'll find that in my books. Hashimoto's Protocol is one focused on Hashimoto's. And then I have Adrenal Transformation Protocol for people with fatigue, insomnia, brain fog, and any kind of stress-related issues that may or may not have thyroid issues. Because I ended up working with a lot of people who just had these stress symptoms. They were like, I don't have a thyroid issue, but I have all these other symptoms. Can you still help me? I'd be like, let's figure it out. And I'm on social media. I'm active on Facebook and Instagram under Dr. Izabella Wentz, Thyroid Pharmacist. You can find me on both platforms.
Awesome. And I got to say, you mentioned your website and your blog. My favorite article of yours, which wine for the thyroid?
Oh, yeah. We had a lot of fun writing that article. My team and I. It was a collaborative effort. One of the ladies I used to work with happened to be a copywriter for a wine company.
Oh, that was good.
And so it was a really fun article that we worked on together. And we release it usually on April 1st.
Yeah. I loved it. That was good. It's like, well, I don't like the butteriness of some Chardonnays, but okay, I see the reason for that.
Yeah, we had a ton of fun creating that article. Thank you for that.
Well, we really appreciate having you on today. Thank you so much. It's been great to connect. Thank you for your wisdom, your journey, and everything you shared, your gift that you brought out to both patients and other healthcare practitioners. It's really amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing in the world, and just such an honor and a pleasure to be here with both of you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Soul of Medicine podcast, where science meets soul for whole health healing. Are you ready to reclaim your energy, vitality, and soul purpose? Then feel free to head to our website at kcorpusmd.com and schedule an appointment for your root cause review.